Welcome to another episode of Respections. Today we have a presentation and we hope you'll enjoy. Stay tuned for many more exciting episodes. I'm your host Patrick Tomlinson, and I do look forward to having you and sharing with
you. Days has come and days has gone. Oh yeah, days are coming and many more yet to be born. And I ask you, what are we gonna do? I ask you, my sister, what are we gonna do for them in those crucial times?
I'm gonna turn it back to Ambassador Comissiong. And we're going to start to make it a little bit more timely, a little bit more current, this conversation. So on March 26, 2025, Charge d'Affaires of the United States Embassy to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean put nationals on notice that residents could be jailed, fined, deported, or banned from returning to the United States for overstaying their visit or working illegally. Ambassador Comissiong, what are some of the practical effects of the change in the immigration policies in the United States on Caribbean societies in the years ahead?
Thank you for that question. One way of approaching an answer is to examine a booklet that I produced about 3 or 4 years ago. Its title is Affirmation of the Darker Brother, the Basis of a CARICOM Sense of Equality with the United States of America and Canada. And the booklet is really making the point that it is somewhat artificial to think of these Caribbean societies being separate from the United States of America and Canada. Because historically, we all started as British colonies. The British came to this hemisphere, and there were 3 poles of British colonization: the West Indies, the colonies of the British West Indies, the North American colonies, those of the lower part of North America, the 13 colonies that eventually became the United States of America, and the northern colonies that eventually came together in the Confederation of Canada. But these were all interconnected. So, we talk about North and South, but in reality, you're really talking about an interconnected system of production, an interconnected system of oppression, an interconnected system of the exploitation of labor. The reality is that the slave colonies of the British West Indies could not have survived unless they were connected to and had relations with the 13 colonies of the United States, what went on to be the United States, or the colonies of Canada. And June referred to the Afro-Barbadians that were taken to South Carolina. South Carolina was actually developed, colonized from Barbados. But even before South Carolina, you're talking the 1670s. Even before that, there were many Afro-Barbadians who made up the early black population of Virginia. There was the colonies of the 13 colonies orchestrated a slave trade. There were American slavers that went to Africa, transported enslaved Africans to colonies like Barbados and St. Kitts and Jamaica. The point is, they were all involved in an interlocking system. And in that interconnected system of production and exploitation of labor, the African population of the Caribbean colonies contributed to the development, to the wealth of the United States of America and Canada. And I mean, you just have to look through the history, you know. Even when our people migrated to those colonies, whether it was forced migration during the slavery period, whether it was migration during the post-emancipation period, and often, as I said, the driver was the oppressive conditions and the poverty back in the Caribbean, but there was also the driver of the ruling classes in the United States and Canada, I think, as you mentioned, needing the labor. And so our people went and helped to build up those societies as you have indicated. So they exploited us in the Caribbean to build their wealth. We migrated to their societies and helped to additionally build their wealth. It's a reality that we have to deal with, as you said. They have indicated that the United States of America will be making migration from the Caribbean much more difficult. Well, you know, the news I have for them, as I said, much of the migration that we were talking about is the migration of the colonial period, before the nationalist governments, before the contemporary Caribbean societies that we have now. Right now, our people are not so desperate as they were in the colonial period, when they were running from very harsh local conditions, because we have national governments whose mission is to uplift and develop and nurture our people. In fact, many of the Caribbean societies now are approaching the demographic profile of developed countries. Barbados has the profile of a developed country. I suspect St. Kitts as well. What do I mean by that? Well, our people are living longer. Our young people are having less children, like they do in developed societies. We are no longer naturally reproducing our population. So we actually have a population deficit. So it really does not profit our societies anymore to have this drain of our people to the United States and Canada. In fact, right now in Barbados, we are developing policies to bring our people back, because we are underpopulated. We need an inward migration of young, economically active people who will work in our economy, who will contribute to the tax revenue, who will pay into the National Insurance and Social Security Scheme. So the point I'm making really is that right now for us in the Caribbean, and Barbados, incidentally, is the most densely populated of the CARICOM territories. Yet, Barbados is underpopulated. So it means that virtually all of our CARICOM countries are underpopulated. And so we don't necessarily benefit from this brain drain. So the point I'm really making is that threat is not as potent as that US official might think it is, because really and truly our fundamental interest now is actually inward migration and developing our populations. But the point I'm making is that even that kind of thinking which says that the wealth that has been established in places like the United States of America has nothing to do with those people in the Caribbean, that is false. That is ahistorical. So it is ahistorical to have this idea that somehow the Caribbean people are strangers to you and that they have no rights. They have many rights, morally speaking. I'm not talking legally. Morally speaking, they have rights because They played a big part in developing, building up what you have. And in fact, I mean, virtually every Caribbean person has family, relatives in the United States and Canada. You know, we have transnational families. So that kind of attitude on the part of the U.S. authorities is going to be very problematical. Not that we are going to be driven by any desperation. We desperately need to get into the United States and Canada. No. In fact, perhaps just the opposite. We need to tamper that brain drain and labor drain. But the reality is that you do have these familial linkages, because for centuries these areas were not separate and distinct. They were all interconnected, and therefore you will have people who legitimately want to move because of family relationships, or because maybe they have acquired skills in the Caribbean where the employment opportunities are less accessible because the economy is not as developed and so forth. So you asked me to look into the future and to see where all of this is heading to. I think that this is something that is going to have to be negotiated. This is something that is probably going to have to require some clearer thought and some more objective thought on the part of the political decision makers here in the United States of America. But I have no doubt that as a Caribbean community, we will approach it in a very rational way. We will not be driven by any sense of desperation, because, as I indicated, it is not really critical for us. Before this year ends, Barbados is likely to pass new legislation that extends citizenship rights to the children and the great-grandchildren of Barbadians born in places like the United States of America, in an effort to entice them back home. So those folk need to understand that we are not desperate to get into these countries, but there are legitimate, humane, family-oriented, and legitimate historical reasons why there ought to be a readily accessible route for our people going back and forth between the Caribbean, United States, and Canada. I think that's the best way I can answer that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Soomer. One writer charts migration over several decades. The debate on immigration has moved from homogeneity to fragmentation, from society to culture, from impact to meaning, and from migration to diaspora. What, in your estimation, Dr. Soomer, will be the new frontier of immigration of Caribbean peoples to the global north, given this shift in the debate on immigration, particularly to the United States?
I want to start where he left off by saying that there must be a reason for people to want to move, always. People don't just get up and go for no reason. And we have had a number of reasons for moving. One of them might be because we live on a small island and we just want the freedom of a bigger space. One of them might be because, as we heard from Dr. Straun, people are looking for a place. They're looking for belonging. And as everybody else has said, people are looking for opportunity. So I am thinking that we have to start looking inward for us to see opportunity. And we have done it very effectively in some of our countries already. So we have laid the foundation, for example, in the OECS countries for freedom of movement. So within our countries, there are opportunities. One of the most interesting things about that is, with freedom of movement in the OECS, is that nobody has moved. We were so afraid, because I was in the whole planning of freedom of movement and doing all of the education on freedom of movement. So I remember going to do a training session with the immigration officers and the policemen about freedom of movement in the OECS and what they were supposed to do when OECS nationals got to the border. Our people are not criminals. So what do you do when they get to the border and you have to allow them in? Because they're going to come in with certain rights as an OECS citizen. The right to live in your country, the right to work in your country, the right to buy property in your country, etc. You have that right as an OECS national in any of the OECS countries. And the policemen, because we put policemen to guard our borders, not immigration officers, they said to me, but these people will just flood our country, and they will just come. And what are we going to do? I said to him, okay, let us give it a year and I'll come back to you. But I want you to monitor how many people enter St. Lucia from the OECS to stay for the next year. And he called me after the first year. I didn't even call him. He called me and he was laughing on the phone. And I said, what is it? He said, I was so wrong and you were so right. Only 3 people have moved to St. Lucia in a year. And they moved because they got married to St. Lucians. So we do have the opportunity that we are not taking advantage of. Our countries are, as he said, beautiful. I mean, St. Lucia is the #1 for the last 7 or 8 years honeymoon capital of the world. And I'm not talking about the Caribbean, I'm talking about the world. So why wouldn't I, for example, want to move to a place like St. Kitts? I lived there for 10 years. It is a beautiful country. I lived in Barbados for 10 years also very beautiful. I feel at home. I feel that sense of belonging throughout the Caribbean. So I think one of the best things for us to do is to market ourselves to each other. We do not see the opportunity and we don't think of it as an opportunity. The other thing is that CARICOM is now putting in place similar measures, or going to put in place similar measures. Some of them have already started since last year. But Prime Minister Motley has promised us that by the end of this year, we'll have full freedom of movement. If we have full freedom of movement to work, as David said, in any of these countries, to contribute to the development of these countries, then we do have that opportunity for us to have that sense of belonging. One of the reasons why we had moved that I have not heard is the whole colonial education that we got, that things were better over there, that this was, things were better in England. So we moved to England after the Second World War for us to help them to rebuild their economy. Okay, whether as people who build the railways or people who were taking care of the sick, etc., etc. We have these opportunities for development in our own countries. And the level of investment that we have been getting in these countries, even if we're not getting foreign direct investment, we can invest in each other's countries with freedom of movement and the ability to move capital from one place to the next. So I'm seeing that the Caribbean is our next greatest frontier for migration. I'm also seeing Africa. with the conversations that CARICOM has been having with the African Union and with Africa, and the desire always to return to our own motherland, I think that's what we're searching for. I think we're searching for Africa, really and truly. And I think that our people will have that opportunity. A lot of people have already repatriated themselves. And one of the things we are asking for in the reparatory justice movement is for settlement in Africa, the right to call Africa home again. And it will come as soon as the flights start coming more often. Barbados Trinidad and Tobago just signed an air services agreement with Nigeria. Barbados has one also. Trinidad had another one. Brazil has one. So Africa is opening up again to the people that were taken and stolen out of Africa. So Africa will be another one. I am telling you that Africa is the next great frontier for the world, because Africa has the largest youth population in the world. Europe is an aging population. You know, it's on the verge of extinction. It's holding on for dear life. And so the new technology in Africa, the youthful population, the fact that you have such open space, you know, I think that is where we have to look. And I also think that we can do it when we start to really articulate what South-South cooperation is really about. What is happening in the North that is trying to keep us out is not taken into consideration the fact that Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, we have the human resources, we have the natural resources, we have the technology, etc., to be able to develop to the point where they will not be able to compete with us. So they're looking at their own, I think that immigration policies, that these current immigration policies, because you also see some of them in Europe, not just here. White nationalism is on the rise in Europe also. So what they are really looking at is their own destruction to our own benefit if we only stop long enough to look at the opportunities that are available to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are coming up to for us, the witching hour. It's 8:14. So I'm going to give Dr. Straun the final word, the final question from me, and then we're going to open it up and allow the audience, any audience member, to ask questions. So Dr. Straun, for those of us who took the leap of faith to migrate from the comfort of home to countries in the global north, how do we successfully rebut the negativity that currently surrounds the topic of migration and that now seems to pervade the atmosphere?
That's a heavy one. I think in so many ways, Ambassador June she put a foot on that one. But from a psychological standpoint, what I usually tell people when you're in a situation like this is you first slow down. Things seems to be moving really fast, slow down. Don't put any extra pressure on yourself to feel like you have to do anything. You know, don't fight or fuel negativity with negativity. A matter of fact, don't fuel it at all. You know, negative energy speaks to fear. And fear over time weakens everybody. And it triggers, when we're talking about with stress, it triggers a fight or flight response and puts you in survival mode. So if you're in survival mode, you're not going to be making the best decisions anyway. So we rebut negativity with love. Because, like I said, fear is about protection. Love is about connection. So when things are falling apart, you connect. You tell your story. You reclaim your narrative. fully, boldly, and unapologetically. You speak your truth. You speak your success stories, but you also speak the full, honest story. The struggle, the sacrifice, the resilience, the healing. Because there's a lot of people who need to know it. There's a lot of people who are going through stuff and they think it's the first time that has ever happened. Not realizing that very few things are new under the sun. We just have to be able to tell those stories. We have to celebrate our contributions. We have to create spaces for collective healing. You know, we can't continue to carry on these invisible wounds, trying to prove that we belong, because we do. You know, so the answer to that in so many ways is choose love. You know, in my practice, especially when I do a group, we always end with the serenity prayer. You guys familiar with that? Yes. You know, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that and wisdom to know the difference. So in so many ways, we're asking for peace or serenity to accept the things that we cannot change. So if we're already saying we cannot change it, there's no reason for us to continue to try, because you can't change it. But it's asking for courage to change the things that you can. And you would think the things that you can should be easy. But the quote is saying courage to change the things that I can. Because courage requires not just strength, but it also requires vulnerability. It requires opening up and letting people see the more softer sides of you, because that's where healing begins. And then the last part, wisdom to know the difference. Didn't say knowledge, because in this age we have the internet, we have a lot of information. And a lot of people think they're really smart because they can chat GPT and spit out a whole bunch of information. But information and even knowledge is not wisdom, because it requires understanding, it requires time, it requires discernment, it requires listening. You know, the highest sign of intelligence is not what you say, but it's how you can listen. A lot of us are not listening. So we slow down, we listen, we tell our stories, and we choose love.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you very much.
Days has come and days is gone. Oh yeah, days are coming and many more yet to be born. And I ask you, what are we gonna do? I ask you, my sister, what are we gonna do for them in this crucial times? Time seems like